As of right now, Fallout 4 is still fully broken for a lot of PlayStation players. You're not imagining it, you're not exaggerating, and you're definitely not alone. DLC that people paid for years ago is missing. Saves won't load. Areas like Far Harbor or Nuka World are inaccessible. Some players can't even boot the game without crashing. Some are afraid to open it at all because they don't want to lose what's left. And throughout all of this, Bethesda is silent. No clear timeline, no rollback option, no acknowledgement that this is a serious ownership issue and not just a minor bug. So if you're angry, frustrated, or just exhausted by this whole situation, that reaction makes complete sense. But here's something that's an even bigger problem. Fallout 4 isn't the real story. It's the symptom. What's happening right now with Fallout 4 on PlayStation isn't an isolated screw-up, and it's not some freak accident caused by one bad patch. It's the most recent, and I would say perhaps the most egregious example of a pattern that's been building inside Bethesda for years. This video is about understanding why Bethesda keeps breaking its own games. Yes, games, plural. And more importantly, why it's getting worse over time instead of better. So for a long time, Bethesda's reputation was complicated. Their games were buggy, yes. Everyone knew that. You expected weird physics, NPCs clipping through walls, quests breaking in funny ways. That was part of the brand, for better or worse. But there was an important difference back then. Once you bought a Bethesda game, you owned it, as you should. Once you bought the DLC, it stayed there, as it should. Once you finished patching the game, it didn't randomly lose content years later, as it shouldn't. Skyrim didn't wake up one day and forget you owned Dawnguard. Fallout 3 didn't suddenly revoke access to Broken Steel. Bugs were a little frustrating, but ownership was stable. You installed the game, you installed the DLC, you played, end of story. That model mattered more than people realized at the time. Because somewhere along the way, Bethesda stopped making games that ended and started making games that had to be maintained indefinitely. And their engine, their update process, and their platform relationships were never built for that. Fallout 4 sits right at the center of that transition. It launched as a traditional single-player RPG. It got its DLC. It should have been done. Instead, it became a living platform. Creation Club, paid content, anniversary updates, next-gen upgrades, storefront integrations, entitlement checks, layered on top of entitlement checks. Every one of those additions assumed the foundation underneath was rock solid. But it wasn't. To understand why Bethesda keeps breaking its own games, we have to talk about the engine. Not in a meme way, not in a lol creation engine bad way, but in terms of what it was actually designed to do. The creation engine and the engines that came before it were built for static ownership. You buy the game, you install the game, you install DLC files locally. The game loads what's there. But it was never built for modern entitlement logic. Things like dynamic storefronts, live authentication, modular paid content, and platform-level licensing systems that can change underneath the game years later. When you bolt those systems on after the fact, you don't get flexibility. You get fragility. Fallout 4 today isn't just Fallout 4, it's a stack. Base game, original DLC, Creation Club content, Anniversary Edition content, next-gen update changes, platform entitlement checks. Each layer assumes the one below it is intact and correctly synced. If one layer fails, everything above it starts behaving unpredictably. That's why some players lose all DLC. That's why others can see the DLC installed but not access it. That's why saves suddenly refuse to load for some players. The game isn't just bugging out. It's failing to reconcile what the engine thinks you own with what the platform says you own. And so, once you cross that line, reinstalling doesn't help. Restoring licenses doesn't help. Restarting doesn't help. Because the problem isn't local files, it's the entitlement logic, layered onto an engine that was never meant to reason about it. Okay, now let's talk about incentives, because this is where things really start to click. Bethesda today doesn't just ship games, they maintain storefronts inside games. Creation Club content, paid mods, anniversary upgrades, that's ongoing revenue. And when revenue depends on a live system, priorities shift. When something breaks, the first thing that has to work again is the store, the purchase flow, the authentication, the ability to sell content. Stability comes second. Legacy saves come later. Old DLC compatibility comes last. I don't think this is some evil genius master plan to steal people's DLC. I genuinely don't. I think it's something more mundane, more boring, and more dangerous: misaligned incentives. Incentives that conflict with one another. The systems that make Bethesda money now are the same systems that are destabilizing their older games. And when conflicts arise, guess which side gets attention first? That's why Fallout 4 can sit broken for months while Creation Club updates still roll out. That's why players feel ignored even when patches happen. The priority of those patches isn't to restore ownership stability. The priority is to keep the ecosystem running, because that ecosystem is what makes money. And if you're a PlayStation player, you feel this more than anyone. Because consoles turn a fragile system into a locked box. On PC, if something breaks, players have options: rollback versions, disable updates, patch files, use community fixes, even bypass broken systems entirely. On PlayStation, you have none of that. You can't roll back Fallout 4. You can't lock it to a working version. You can't patch entitlement logic yourself. You can't install unofficial fixes. Once an update breaks your game, you're stuck waiting. Add disk-based licenses, regional mismatches, and Sony's restrictions on external assets, and you get the perfect storm. A game that depends on live entitlement checks running on a platform that gives players zero control over those systems. So when people say, oh, just reinstall, or, well, it works for me, they're missing the point. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, there is no clever trick left. That's not a player failure, that's a structural failure. And that's why Fallout 4 breaking on PlayStation is a warning sign, not just of what they've done, but of what's coming in the future. Because the same forces that broke Fallout 4 are still very much in place, and they're not going away. What worries me even more is that Fallout 4 isn't the first time this has happened. It's just the first time it's happened at this scale, this late in a game's life, and in a way that directly impacts paid ownership. Bethesda has a long history of shipping broken systems and relying on time, patches, or the community to smooth things over. That pattern used to feel manageable when the consequences were mostly bugs or performance issues. But now, the consequences are ownership problems. Fallout 76 launched in a state so unstable it became a meme. Entire features were removed, promises were walked back, content was vaulted, reintroduced, reworked, then monetized again. Players lost items, progress vanished, servers went down and took paid content with them. Starfield arrived with enormous expectations and somehow managed to feel outdated as soon as it arrived. Systems that should have been modern felt underdeveloped. Updates intended to improve things often introduced new problems. Mod support was delayed, then restricted. Even basic features were missing at launch. And through all of this, the same pattern kept repeating. Big updates, big promises, small fixes, new problems. What's different now is that Bethesda used to break gameplay, but now they're also breaking access. When Fallout 4 loses DLC, that's not a bug you can laugh off. That's not Bethesda jank. That's a customer discovering that something they bought years ago can simply stop working overnight. And that changes the relationship entirely. In my previous videos, a lot of people ask the same question in the comments. Why doesn't Bethesda just fix it? That question assumes the fix is simple. It isn't. Fixing Fallout 4's DLC issues on PlayStation likely means untangling years of layered systems. That includes old DLC entitlements, disk-based licenses, region checks, Creation Club logic, next-gen upgrade rules, and Sony's platform requirements. Every one of those systems was added at a different time, for a different reason, often by different teams. There is no single switch to flip. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud. Fixing this properly might break something else. It might invalidate purchases. It might require issuing new entitlements. It might require Sony-level cooperation. It might even cost Bethesda money. And when you're dealing with a 10-year-old game, companies start asking uncomfortable questions. How many players are still affected? How many of them will actually leave? How many will just buy the Anniversary Edition and move on? I'm not speculating here. That's how these decisions get made. So when months pass and nothing meaningful changes, it's not because Bethesda doesn't know there's a problem. Trust me, they know. It's because the incentive to fully untangle it is weak compared to the risk of making things worse. That's why silence feels like indifference. Because functionally, it is. This is also why the problem feels bigger than just Bethesda. What's happening here touches the entire modern gaming industry. Digital ownership has slowly shifted into digital permission. You don't buy a product anymore. You buy access to a license that depends on servers, storefronts, and systems you don't control. And sure, as long as everything works, nobody notices. The moment something breaks, you realize how powerless you actually are. You can't roll back updates. You can't freeze a working version. You can't say no to changes that affect your purchase. Fallout 4 just happened to be the game that exposed this reality in the ugliest possible way. And for PlayStation players especially, it's brutal because there is no safety net, no workaround, no escape hatch. When the system fails, you lose access. Full stop. That's why so many comments say the same thing in different words. I just wanted to play the game again. I wasn't even asking for new content. I paid for this years ago. Those aren't unreasonable expectations. In fact, I'd say they're the bare minimum. People simply want to enjoy a product they bought and paid for. So where does all this leave Bethesda? In a worse position than I think they probably realize. Because trust doesn't collapse all at once. It erodes quietly, one incident at a time. People remember Fallout 3 on PS3. They remember Skyrim breaking mods repeatedly. They remember Fallout 76. They remember Starfield. And now, they remember Fallout 4 DLC disappearing. Each incident teaches the same lesson. Don't rely on Bethesda. Don't count on them to preserve what you bought. That lesson sticks, and once players internalize it, future releases suffer. Some people hate Bethesda, but I think a more fundamental and more serious issue is that people don't trust Bethesda. You can see it already in the comments, in the tone, in the hesitation and skepticism around Elder Scrolls 6. People aren't excited. They're cautious, guarded, weary. That's not how hype works. That's how damage looks. So let's bring this back to Fallout 4 for a second. If you're still affected by missing DLC on PlayStation, there is nothing wrong with you. You didn't mess up. You didn't miss a secret fix. You didn't break your game. You ran into the edge of a system that was never designed to protect long-term ownership. That's the truth, even if it's not comforting. And that's why I've been so careful in my videos not to sell false hope, because pretending there's a magic fix only shifts the blame onto players when it doesn't work. The real fix has to come from Bethesda, or possibly Sony, but most likely Bethesda. Anything else is a band-aid. If and when that fix arrives, I'll cover it immediately. Until then, the most honest thing I can say is this. Fallout 4 is broken because of years of accumulated decisions finally colliding. It's not simply one bad patch. And unless something changes structurally, we will continue seeing stuff like this. Bethesda broke their own game. But what's even more important is that they broke trust, and not for the first time. And rebuilding that is a lot harder than pushing an update.